We're now joined via Zoom by Professor Hartmut Winkler, Energy Analyst and Physicist at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So plenty of reaction as expected, following the SONA address. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa saying, he's declared a national state of disaster for Eskom and announced a new ministry which will be in charge of electricity in the country, as we've heard. What do you make of this announcement? And is it the right move to try and solve the current challenges at Eskom?
I think something that we've got to understand is that there's no quick to the electricity crisis. We're in this for several years, despite, of course, most people wanting this to be over as soon as possible. Yes, a number of things have been announced, a state of disaster and so on. I really don't think it's going to make a tremendous difference. It might help here and there, but by and large, it sounds much more dramatic than it actually is. What additional powers does this give the government to deal with this particular situation, and especially to resolve things quickly? I can't really think of any in particular. So it's something certainly that the ANC's National Executive Committee very badly wanted. But I think it was clear even there that nobody was really sure how exactly that was going to function in such a way that you could actually alleviate the crisis. The problem in South Africa's electricity sector is simply that there's not enough electricity being produced because a very large number of the power stations are not functioning, and fixing them a lot of people claim they can do it quickly, but it's pretty clear to me that you can't. And so as a result, we just simply have to wait for more generating capacity to come on board. And whichever way you want to do that, that's something which is not going to go quickly.
I mean,
as far as this new minister, yes?
No, continue, Prof.
Yes, as far as this new minister is concerned, I think that was a surprise. Again, will it make any kind of a difference? It's certainly, in a sense, what surprised me is that this almost comes across as a challenge to the current Minister of Minerals and Energy Affairs, who was quite clear that he thought he should be given the rights to run Eskom in addition to the other tasks he already has. And now to announce that somebody else is going to be in charge of not only Eskom, but everything to do with this crisis, this very much impinges on some of the functions of Gwede. For example, how do we go about the electricity planning aspect and so on? Who exactly does what? Are we going to have a situation where these two ministers are going to be competing and maybe contradicting each other? I think it's a very good chance of that happening. A lot of people would have been unhappy with Gwede effectively also being in charge of Eskom, simply because he's viewed as somebody who only sees the only route he sees out of this situation is just to sort out the coal power stations, and he sees any other kind of solution, such as in particular renewables, as not being feasible. And so he's seen as a bit of a stumbling block to that particular solution to the situation. And I get the sense that the presidency does very much believe in this strategy, which came across in many places during the talk last night, namely this question of expanding renewables, expanding solar. And that was really all over the show, and it's something which has literally happened already, simply because various companies and so on just simply couldn't really wait anymore, so they're going their own route.
And that's probably why, just staying on that point, why a lot of people are saying, this complicates the matter in as far, as getting this new minister on board. And just to talk about those roles and responsibilities, I mean, we are told that this new minister will obviously sit very closely with the leadership team of Eskom, but then the president also then, expands on the role of what the energy minister is going to be doing, which also is very similar, saying that, the energy minister will focus full-time on Eskom and work with the board and management to end load shedding. And then at the same time, public enterprises minister will remain the shareholder representative of Eskom and steer the restructuring of Eskom. It means, that this becomes even more problematic, because one of the complaints that you would hear from either the former Eskom board or the executive of Eskom is that there's this bureaucracy that does affect the way in which they work. Will this not then hamper the work of Eskom when you have these three ministers essentially dealing with one problem?
Yes, I think as well. Perhaps the reason why this particular person that's supposed to be the fixer has been declared should be become a minister is simply to give them the kind of gravitas which allows them to compete with the other two ministers currently engaged in the situation. They might just otherwise just simply be a delegate from the presidency that's supposed to speed things up. I mean, those sort of people we've already got. So I think what's also played into this whole process was that President Ramaphosa was in a very difficult situation last night. He could have either told the country that we are in such a difficult situation with electricity that if everything goes right, we'll be out of it in about 5 years' time, and things maybe will be a little bit better, but probably not for the next 2 years or so. Now, he would have been criticized severely if he had taken this line. The alternative was that he could have come up with a few things which sound like they're going to really make a difference when ultimately they're not going to have that much of an impact. And so I think he was threw in a few issues like that, which, and I think we can see this state of disaster along the same lines. It certainly sends a message that the government is now seeing this as a top priority. But whether one can in fact use this to really make progress that one wouldn't have been able to do without declaring such a state of disaster, I don't really see it. I think people that have analyzed the powers that one has in such situations, and there's very little to suggest that you could actually really use those additional powers to make a difference.